This is the essence of the verses 40 to 47, and this brings the closure of the chapter 1. Kulakshaye pranasyanti kuladharmaha sanatanaha dharme nashte kulam krutsnam adharma abhibhavati uta. Adharma vibhavat Krishna pradushyanti kulastriyah strishu drushtasu vashneya jayate varna sankaraha. Sankara narakaya eva kulajnanam kulasya cha patanti pitara esham lupta pindoda kriyaha. Doshaihi etaihi kulajnanam varna sankara karakaihi उत्साद्यन्ते जाति धर्माः कुलधर्मा च शाश्वताः. उत्सन्न कुलधर्माणां मनुष्याणां जनार्दन नरके नियतं वासः भवति इति अनुशुश्रमा. यदि माम् अप्रतीकारम् असस्त्रं शस्त्रपाणयः धार्तराष्ट्रां रणे हन्युः तत् मे क्षेमतरं भवेत्. एव मुक्त्वार्जुनः संख्ये रथोपस्थ उपाविशत् विसृज्य ससरं चापं शोकसंविघ्न मानसः. Arjuna continues his arguments here, saying, the age-old family dharmas are lost in the destruction of a family. Its dharma lost, adharma overtakes the entire family. When adharma prevails, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupt, and with the corruption of women, O Varshneya, intermixture of castes arises. This intermixture leads only to hell, both for the family and its destroyers. Their forefathers fall as well when the offerings of the Pindodaka cease. Through the wrongs done by the destroyers of the family and causing the intermixing of the castes, the immemorial dharmas of the Varna and the family become extinct. Men whose family dharmas have lapsed, so we have heard, O Janardana, Lord Krishna, these necessarily live in hell. Here, Arjuna's chief concern is the preservation of the path of evolution. With this in view, he places great value on dharma and on the conduct of society which supports it and upheld by it. Here, Arjuna shows great foresight and he presents a very highly developed mind. His thinking is extremely logical and correct, and it does not come from the superficial level of consciousness. The basis of his thinking is dharma, the basic power of evolution, and Arjuna's vision is not restricted. The boundaries of his foresight lie far in the future. Arjuna is a great man of his time, and before entering upon an undertaking, he is gauging the influence on succeeding generations, what happens to the future generations. Only such a heightened state of consciousness could inspire the dawn of great wisdom on earth. When he says the age-old family dharmas are lost in the destruction of a family, he is referring to the ideals of life that have withstood the test of time, and they represent the genuine path of evolution. The traditions which have survived the ages have certainly proved themselves to be the right one, the one nearest to the truth, which is life eternal. So Arjuna is afraid to break these age-old traditions, to break this path of evolution for the generations to come. in the form of family traditions, in the form of age-old dharmas. Many specific modes of activity are passed on from generation to generation, and they form what we call traditions. And it is these age-old traditions which are coming from family to family. They're also known as family dharmas. So here Arjuna is saying, if dharma is lost, then adharma overtakes the entire family. He is further saying that when adharma prevails, the women of the family become corrupt, and with the corruption of women, O Varshneya, intermixture of varnas arises. Here the word caste is used, but actually in the Sanskrit verse it says varna. Varna is based on the gunas, and the castes have come later on, and they have become the basis of the whole confusion now. So we will try to sort this out later as we go along. A mother's life is the expression of the creative power of nature, and the creative intelligence of this mother has to be pure in order to be effective. Since the mother denotes the creative intelligence, any impurity brings ineffectiveness, and when ineffectiveness increases, destruction is the result. For the purity of the mother is of great concern. So for the creation of more effective people for the future generations, then this purity of the mother's life should be maintained. Again, the varnas are based on the gunas, the sattva, rajas, rajasic, and the tamasic. And these give rise to the four varnas, the brahmanas, the kshatriyas, the vaisyas, and the sudras. So these varnas again are purely based on the gunas alone. And Arjuna says the intermixture of these varnas will bring great sorrow and suffering. This is of great concern to Arjuna because he understands how difficult and dangerous it is to shift from one boat to another in a fast current of life. All beings under the tremendous influence of the mighty force of nature are held fast in the current of evolution, and each has his own specific course to follow. That means each has his own dharma to follow. If a man deviates from his own natural course, his own dharma, then it is like changing boats in a fast current. He has to struggle hard to maintain life, a struggle which is experienced as sorrow and suffering, and which gives rise to all problems on the path of evolution. This natural classification of varnas based on the gunas then will allow one to stay in one's own dharma, because depending on the aptitude and depending on the creative intelligence and other important characteristics belonging to this field of dharma, then each one has his own dharma to follow. So this becomes a natural and orderly evolution. Now Arjuna has been presenting many of these problems, the basic problems of life, through all through these verses of 28 to 46. And Lord Krishna is going to reveal this pure knowledge that will answer every problem. And the answer to every problem is that there is no problem. Let a man perceive this truth, and then he is without problems. This is the strength of the knowledge, the strength of Samkhya, the strength of the wisdom that offers instantaneous realization and which is going to be revealed by Lord Krishna. So here Arjuna continues his argument saying, this intermixture of varnas leads only to hell, both for the family and its destroyers. their forefathers fall as well, especially when the offerings of the Pindodaka cease. Arjuna's vision is perfect and his concern is genuine. The depth of his thought, his foresight, and love for human life and society inspire Lord Krishna to strengthen him with the wisdom of eternal liberation. Lord Krishna here is quietly listening to what he is saying in order to prepare him more thoroughly for this great blessing. Every sentiment expressed by Arjuna, every doubt raised by him, and every inquiry of his into the field of knowledge is being sympathetically received by Lord Krishna and will be answered by him to Arjuna's satisfaction. Purity of blood is at the basis of long life for a family and society. And this purity depends upon the preservation of ancient family traditions. Destruction of the social order is the greatest loss to a nation. Arjuna is viewing the battle with this vital consideration in mind, taking into account the life of many future generations. Pindodaka, according to the Vedic Karma Kanda, the exposition of karma or action, sons and grandsons are expected to perform certain rites and ceremonies in the name of their departed father and grandfather. The performance of these rites by the direct blood relations, according to the law of affinity, brings goodwill, peace, and satisfaction to the departed forefathers, wherever they may be in the field of evolution. Not only this, just as a child receives blessings and comforts from his parents, so the departed also bless their children. The Vedic performance of the Pindodaka connects the departed parents with their children on earth and serves as a channel through which the blessings flow. And again, Arjuna is continuing, saying, through the wrongs done by the destroyers of the family in causing the intermixing of varnas, the immemorial dharmas of varna and family become extinct. There are dharmas governing individual evolution, and then there are dharmas which connect and coordinate different individuals. These latter are set primarily to govern the evolution of the society or a whole varna. In this verse, he is considering the dharma of the varna, which is also referred to as caste, that is, a collection of families upholding similar dharmas. So here, Arjuna's concern is, by the intermixing of these varnas, then many of these ideals preserved by the immemorial traditions are disturbed and destroyed and become the direct result of upsetting the social equilibrium. This family dharma is an established tradition where people born in a particular family engage in the profession of that family. Because of their parental heritage, they work efficiently, produce better material for society, and improve in their profession. They work with all ease and comfort in their profession. They do not exhaust themselves in work and find time to be regular in their practice for spiritual unfoldment. And this is the basis of all success in life. And this is how family dharmas and traditions help to both the individual and the society. These family dharmas, they also uphold the family. They uphold the coordination between different members of a family, and at the same time enabling every member, consciously or unconsciously, to help every other member on this path of evolution. Such family dharmas, they strengthen the relationships of the family, and they make up the relationships of a mother with her son or daughter, or of a brother with his brother or sister, and so on. Here the family dharmas support the different members of the family and help them to naturally grow and help each of them to evolve in life. So when this dharma is destroyed in the families, then life in such a family is a life in hell, and those fallen into such a degenerate pattern of life remain off the path of evolution and continue to mold their destinies in wretchedness. This is what Arjuna means when he says, necessarily live in hell. Here Arjuna's concern is very clear, that he is concerned over the destruction of the dharmas, and it indicates that he is reviewing the whole situation from the point of view of the working of nature, of the natural evolutionary order. This verse establishes a fundamental principle of action, that action should be such that it does not stray from the invisible power of dharma. That means it should not violate dharma. Here is the great teaching of vital importance which has been missed for centuries. It sets a standard for any society. And in the following verse, Arjuna says, once wisdom could fail one, and wrong decisions can result when these family dharmas have lapsed. Now Arjuna laments, we are resolved to commit great sin, in that we are prepared to slay our kinsmen out of greed for the pleasure of a kingdom. Arjuna feels sorrowful because he is going to sacrifice a greater end for a smaller gain. All of the family and varna dharmas are going to be sacrificed for the sake of his individual dharma. Arjuna calls this a great sin because he is aware that the establishment of righteousness is a cooperative enterprise. All men have to play their part in it, and this can be done only when family and varna dharmas are properly maintained by the individuals firmly established in their individual dharmas. The loss of family and varna dharmas or the caste dharmas is a calamity for the social order, a destruction of righteousness. It is a sin against God, and that is why Arjuna is saying this is a great sin. Now Arjuna says, it were better for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, should slay me, unresisting and unarmed in the battle. He says he sees no way of escape from the situation, and he is better off being killed in battlefield. Because he cannot be killed while armed and alert, he wishes to be unarmed and unresisting. In this way he will not incur great sin against God. This is the faultless mind of the great archer of all time. This is bravery and nobility of character. Arjuna considers it better to die than to commit sin. Now this is the final verse of the chapter 1, where Sanjaya is saying, having spoken thus at the time of the battle, casting away arrow and bow, Arjuna sat down on the seat of the chariot, his mind overwhelmed with sorrow. Arjuna's mind was overwhelmed with sorrow. The hour of duty was at hand, but his heart prevented him from responding. With his clear mind, he could visualize the far-reaching effects of the destruction the battle would bring. This overwhelmed his thoughts with sorrow. Fortunate are those whose minds are distressed for the misfortunes of the others. More fortunate still are those who are able to relieve the misfortunes of others, themselves remaining undisturbed. Now, in the second chapter, Arjuna will receive the light which will enable him, without a trace of distress and established in the blissful freedom of God consciousness, to alleviate the evil overshadowing the world. Thus ends the first chapter. Iti Srimad Bhagavad Gita Upanishadsu Brahma Vidyayam Yoga Shastre Sri Krishnarjuna Samvade Arjuna Vishada Yago Nama Pradhamodhyayaha. Thus, in the Upanishad of the glorious Bhagavad Gita, in the science of the Absolute, in the scripture of Yoga, in the dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna, ends the first chapter entitled The Yoga of the Despondency of Arjuna. Now I will add a few words. Maharshi's great vision of bringing this Bhagavad Gita is to help enlightenment, to bring enlightenment to one and all. Bhagavad Gita is referred to as Upanishad, and an Upanishad is the experiential knowledge of the consciousness. So, consciousness is the basis of all Vedic knowledge and also of our existence, of who we are. We are the unmanifest, eternal being, the Atma, and we are also the relative consciousness, which we see as matter, as name and form, as mind, senses, ego. So, our goal should be to experience this consciousness, to experience the subtler aspects of the relative consciousness, and to finally arrive at the absolute consciousness or the being, and to cognize that you are that. You are that infinite, all-pervading consciousness, which is full, which is complete, which is total or whole. Just as we say in the verse, Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavisishyate. And its meaning is Om, that is complete, full, perfect. This is complete. From the completeness comes the completeness. If completeness is taken away from completeness, only completeness remains. Om, peace and peace. Now again, the word completeness denotes fullness, perfection and wholeness. They're all synonymous words. So this Bhagavad Gita will be very valuable for people who are practicing the art of transcendence regularly and who are able to transcend. So this brings great expansion for the intellectual knowledge one is gaining, the awareness that is unfolding, the cognitions that are shifting. We can also say out of the whole came out the whole. Even if the whole is removed from the whole remains as whole. This wholeness is what the Atma represents, the being represents. For one who has realized his Atma, the self-realization, he understands or has the cognition that he is infinite, all-pervading, and he is full and complete. He is not limited. and integrated with all the parts of the whole. He remains as the whole in spite of knowing that there are several parts that are existing within him, several aspects existing. He remains as the whole, he remains as the being. Such a person never loses the sight of this totality or the wholeness. So there are no gaps or incompletions in his existence. Such an individual with Purnatva is Lord Krishna. Lord Krishna has the cosmic mind where there is no duality, because the duality is there in the individual mind. But Krishna has the cosmic mind, and so also the enlightened beings. Because there is no division or the duality, then the thoughts are all aligned to nature or the dharma. The thoughts that arise are to uphold this dharma, uphold the good of all, and helping this natural stream of evolution. Then there are the words and the speech. The words and speech are not different from the thoughts. The same thoughts are conveyed as words and speech, and so there is integration between the thoughts and the words, and there is integrity. Now out of these thoughts and the speech then come the actions, and these actions also are in the same vein just as the thoughts and the words. They are all integrated, they are not different. When you are not thinking one thing, saying one thing and doing one thing, which normally happens when there is duality and when there are gaps. So Lord Krishna represents this, and so also many of the enlightened beings attain this Purnatva. The self or the being is devoid of the gunas and devoid of the elements. The three gunas, the sattva, rajas, and the tamasic, again the sattva, the rajas, and the tamas, become the basis of the mind, the individual mind, and they in different proportions become the different individualistic minds with individual egos. Then the elements, the 5 elements, become the 3 doshas and give rise to different aspects of the forms, the structures, and become the basis of the body, mind, and emotions, in addition to the gunas influencing the mind. So again we understand in the being there are no gunas and there are no doshas, coming from the elements. So there is no duality nor the multiplicity. Now because of these gunas, the mind expresses itself in so many different ways, and along with its emotions and sentiments and memories and patterns and the impressions that it has carried from past lives and what is being created now. So this individual mind then starts expressing itself in different ways. It gains the complex character, behavior, its likes and dislikes, and different psychology. So because of this complexity born of the gunas in the form of duality and this multiplicity, then the mind expresses itself in 4 different ways and 4 different dimensions, and it creates 4 identities for itself. And the first is called Mamakara, and this is the inner identity. Mamakara, this is the inner identity, and it is what we feel about ourselves, what we feel we can actually do, what we think are our possibilities, and what is our personality about our likes and dislikes, etc. So this is the Mamakara. Then the next identity is Ahamkara. And so we have an inner identity, but we want to project to the others another kind of identity, which is the Ahamkara. We want to project what others should see us as, and we project to others what we aspire, what we actually want to do, what we want to achieve, and what we want to be in their eyes. So normally there is a gap between what you think you are and what you want to project to others, whether your abilities and capabilities, whether you like whatever you like or dislike, or how you want others to perceive you as being a great and noble person, or kind and compassionate, or forgiving, or very capable and experienced. But you may not be that. In your inner image or inner identity or Mamakara, you may know that you are not really up to that mark with any of the things that you are trying to project. So in general, what you are is less than what you are projecting to others. And so here a gap remains. And the third identity which all human beings have to live with is Anyakara. Anyakara is what others think and perceive you to be. What others think and perceive you to be is Anyakara. You might be one thing, you might be projecting something else to others, but others might think that oh no, she thinks this way, she talks this way, but she's not really that. She thinks she's very capable, but she's not that capable. She thinks she's very good-hearted, but she's really not. This is the others. Others, what they're thinking about you. Others' image is Anyakara. So now you have already 3 of these identities. The Mamakara, what you are about yourself, what you think about yourself, how you project yourself to others is the Ahamkara, and the Anyakara is what others think about you really. Now there are gaps between all 3. There is no consistency. There is no integration. You think of yourself something, then you project to them others, as a very inflated or a hype or much more than what you are. And then others start thinking, no, this is not what this person is, and that brings a great disappointment and discomfort. Then there is the 4th identity, which is called Swanyakara. Swanyakara is what we think about life and what we think about others, or what we perceive as our value system and beliefs. So how we perceive the world, how we perceive life in general, how we perceive others, how we judge and value others, and our belief systems and value systems in terms of our traditions, faith, religion, so many things. And this is Swanyakara. So one carries these 4 identities, and there are gaps because there is not the completeness. So one's whole goal is to attain this integration and integrity, to be the same with your Mamakara, Ahamkara, Anyakara, and Swanyakara. Here we see Lord Krishna. He is always the same, whether what he is thinking, how he is acting, how others perceive him, or how he sees the world, because he doesn't see anything which is not the self, because he is Brahman and he sees everything as that Brahman only. He is divine and he sees everything as the divine only. It's only by raising the consciousness along with the intellectual knowledge and intellectual aware and the self-awareness that one can bridge these gaps and rise to wholeness. Then the integration comes with the thoughts, with the speech, and with the actions. And what you think you are on the inside is what you show to others. And the others also perceive that you are what you are. And then with this, you see the world also as that wholeness, as that divinity, as that pure consciousness. These four identities should be brought into alignment so that they are aligned and integrated. And this cannot be done just by an intellectual understanding again, or just by self-awareness. The consciousness has to rise, and when the consciousness rises, then everything rises with it. The mind will rise, the sattva will rise in the mind. The mind will become more integrated, more responsible. It will develop more Shraddha. Shraddha is called authenticity. Then your mind expands much more than the individual mind and becomes the cosmic mind. When it becomes the cosmic mind, then you're all the time wanting to enrich everyone and everything around you. You want to be responsible not only for yourself but for others. And you want to be authentic, or you want to have Shraddha and reach the highest potential, the peak performance or the full potential. You become integrated to your thoughts and to your words and to your actions, integrated to your gurus, integrated to your duties and dharma. It is the confusion, the non-alignment between all these identities that is responsible for all our dilemmas, our inauthenticities, our sufferings, and everything that we know. It is only by raising the sattva in the mind and by raising the consciousness, gaining the higher states of consciousness leading to enlightenment, then the perfection dawns, then the completeness comes, then the wholeness comes. This brings an end to the duality and to this multiplicity, and everything becomes integrated. There is full integration. One never loses the sight of being. One exists as the being and enjoys everything in the relative. And this is the ultimate teaching of the Bhagavad Gita, is to how to attain this Purnatva and not to be lost in the parts or in completions or in limitations or boundaries, but live in full freedom and in bliss. So this is the vision you should carry for yourself, that you learn the art of transcending, you transcend every day, gain this intellectual knowledge, and also gain the awareness and be enlightened. Jai Gurudev. Loka samasta sukhino bhavantu.
ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। गीतामाहात्म्यम्। गीताशास्त्रमिदं पुण्यं यः पठेत् प्रयतः पुमान् विष्णोः पदमवाप्नोति भयशोकादिवर्जितः। गीताध्ययनशीलस्य प्राणायामपरस्य च नैव सन्ति हि पापानि पूर्वजन्मकृतानि च। मलनिर्मोचनं पुंसां जलस्नानं दिने दिने सकृद्गीताम्भसि स्नानं संसारमलनाशनं। गीतासु गीता कर्तव्या किमन्यैः शास्त्रविस्तरैः या स्वयं पद्मनाभस्य मुखपद्माद्विनिसृता। भारतामृतसर्वस्वं विष्णोर्वक्त्राद् विनिसृतं। गीता गङ्गोदकं पीत्वा पुनर्जन्म न विद्यते। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्सः सुधीर्भोक्ता